Started. We are on 17 Daf Yud Zayin Amud Bet 17b2. Okay, about halfway through the page. Kol hakatub. Do you see that? Kol hakatub. Sorry, about 3/4 of the way through the page by the two dots. No, Kol hakatub Megillat Taanit. Okay, the Mishnah says, Kol HaKatuv b'Megillat Taanit. In this Sefer, Megillat Taanit, a book that was compiled by Hananya, and it listed in all the days, the holidays, that we were not allowed to fast, and ones that were as well a higher level, that we were not allowed even to eulogize. Kol HaKatuv b'Megillat Taanit, lo lemisped, lefanav, asur, v'lacharav, mutar. Not only are you not allowed to fast on the day, you're also not allowed to fast on the day before it. Tan Rabbanan, our rabbis taught, Ilen Yomaya, these days, delol hit'ana bahon, umiktzata tahon, delol misped bahon. These days that you don't fast, and some that you don't even eulogize on them, miresh yarcha de Nisan ve'ad tman yabe, from the first day of Nisan until the 8th day, itokim, Tamidah. The Tamid was set up, as we explained last time. There was a machloket between the sages and the Siddukim. The Siddukim said, you don't bring, the Korban Tamid should be brought on a private level, because it says, Et hakeves echad ta'aseh. The rabbis argued and said, no, it says, right after that, it says, it uses a plural lashon, right? Tishmeru la'akriv mu'ado. So they argued back and forth until finally they convinced, using the proofs of the Pesukim, they convinced the Siddukim and they agreed, and the Tamid was saved, that it should come from the communal purse. That they finished that fight on Tman Yabeh on the 8th day of the holiday. So they made those days that you would not fast on those days. Ad sof, so the Gemara continues. Mitman Yabeh ad sof mu'ada itotir haga de shivu'aya. Says the Gemara, and from the 8th day until the end of the holiday of Pesach, we established the correct day for Shavuot, because the Baitusim at the time, they argued that actually it should be where should that be? It should fall on a Sunday always, and you count only from the day after Shabbat, not after the day of rest. The rabbis disagreed. It took them until the end of the holiday of Pesach to convince the Baitusim, and they saved the holiday of Shavuot from being hijacked by these people, and therefore, from the 8th day until the end of the holiday, we don't say Tahanun, says the Gemara. Sorry, we don't fast on those days. Amar Mar taught, Miresh Yachad Nisan ad Tmanye, V'rosh Chodesh Gufei Yom Tovu Ve'asur. The Gemara says, why did you need to tell me from the beginning of the month until the 8th day? It should have really said from the 2nd day. Why? Because the first day, Rosh Chodesh, you didn't need to tell me that it's because of the Siddukim that we're not going to allow you to fast on. We already know that Rosh Chodesh is called a Yom Tov. Where is it called a Yom Tov? It says, Kara alay moed. The Pasuk says in Echa, that he called upon me, Moed, from that day. Moed always is the language we use for Yom Tov. So from that we know that Rosh Chodesh is considered a Yom Tov. I don't need you to tell me, therefore, that from the beginning of the month of Nisan, we're not going to use it as a day for fasting or for eulogies, because anyway, that would be the halacha for Rosh Chodesh regardless. Yom Tovu ve'asur. Amar Rav answered, Lo nitzrecha, we did not require, you didn't need to tell me this, that Rosh Chodesh is part of these days in Megillat Taanit, Ela le'esor yom shlefanav. The reason why we put it in Megillat Taanit is not because I would not have known that you couldn't fast on Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is already its own holiday, even without Megillat Taanit. Why do we stick it in Megillat Taanit? Because since every day in Megillat Ta'anit, we say you're not allowed to fast on that day, and you're not allowed to fast on the day before, we stuck it in there so that you wouldn't fast on the day before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Is the Gemara, what, without putting it in the Megillat Ta'anit, I would have known that? Shilifnei Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh deoraitahu. Sorry, b'fnei Rosh Chodesh. I don't need you to tell me that. Since it's the day before Rosh Chodesh, even if you didn't put it in Megillat Ta'anit, the same reasoning that we use in Megillat Ta'anit to establish that lifanav, that before it, is inappropriate to fast, because then you're going to either forget the holiday or you're going to come into the holiday in the spirit of fasting. Whichever the reason is, that reason would apply equally to Rosh Chodesh as it would to to this day as well, to the days of Megillat Ta'anit. Answers the Gemara, no. Rosh Chodesh deoraitahu. Rosh Chodesh is from the Torah. V'deoraita lo ba'i chizuk. It doesn't need strengthening, because you know what? It's so strong, no one's going to forget it. Or everyone's going to remember that I can't bring the fasting vibes into Rosh Chodesh. Why? Because it's a mitzvah from the Torah. However, these other things, since they are established by the rabbis, so sometimes something which is established by the rabbis, people think it's less hashuv, it's less important. So therefore, we have to strengthen it in order to be able to make sure that people don't, because you have, like, as an example, so often, a rabbi, second day Yom Tov, anyway, second day. Second day is midrabanan. People are mizalzel in something which is midrabanan, so therefore, we go the extra mile to make sure that it's okay, my friends, that it's going to be safe. So therefore, we had to include Rosh Chodesh in Megillat Ta'anit, because if it was not there, you might have said, on the day, of course you can't fast. But the day before, that's only reserved for something which is midrabanan, not with something which is deoraita. Connection just died. I'm not sure why.
Here's mine.
Are you on the Wi-Fi here?
Yeah. Did that work?
I'm not. They just lost connection. Want to try on yours, Harry?
Yeah.
I don't know what the difference is, but I guess we'll find out.
Failed. Oh, it can only be one quarter.
Try it again.
Sorry,
Okay, let's continue. Okay, Ditanya. Like we said in the Braita, Hayamim ha'ele aktuvim Megillat Ta'anit. These days that are written in the Megillat Ta'anit, lifnehem v'la acharehem asurin. In front of them and after them, the day after, asurin. They are forbidden. Shabbatot v'yamim tovim. When it comes to Shabbat and Yom Tov, hen asurin. They are asur to fast on. Lifnehem v'la acharehem mutarin. The day, the front of and the day after Shabbat and Yom Tov are mutar to fast. Ask the Gemara, Uma hefresh ben zeh lezeh. What's the difference between these and those? Halalu divrei Torah, v'divrei Torah en tzrichin chizuk. These are words of the Torah, and they don't need to be strengthened. Anyway, people know how strict they are. However, the others, halalu divrei sofrim, those are from the midrabanan. V'divrei sofrim tzrichim chizuk. They need to be buttressed, to be strengthened, in order to make sure that people don't take them for granted and override them. Amar Mar taught, mitmanya be, the 8th day, ad sof mo'ada, until the end of the moed, until the end of the holiday, itotav hagad shvuaya, de lo lemisped. We strengthened the holiday of Shavuot, that it shouldn't come out on the wrong day. So therefore, from the 8th until the end of the holiday, we're not going to fast. Gemara asks similar question. Lamali, why do we need ad sof moed until the end of the holiday? Lema ad moed, say until the holiday. Umoed gufei yom tovhu. The holiday itself is yom tov, and therefore ve'asur, it's asur because it's yom tov. Amar Rav Papa, kida Amar Rav. Rav Papa said, like Rav taught us, lo nitzrecha, it was not required, ela le'esor yom shlifanav. We only included it only to say that the day in front of it was also asur, just like we answered by Rosh Chodesh. Hachanami lo nitzrecha ela la'asor yom shel-acharav. We only put it in over here to forbid the day that is afterward, that comes after the moed. So before the moed, right, before the holiday, we had to put in. We took it all the way till the end of the holiday. With there, that day, you don't have the answer of lefanav. Because the day before, the last day of the holiday, what is it? It's also a holiday. So you don't have the answer that you gave in the first instance of Rosh Chodesh. Lifanav, answers the Gemara, le'esor yom shela'acharav, to forbid from fasting the day after the holiday, which is also asur. Kiman, who's this going according to? Ki Rabbi Yossi, according to Rabbi Yossi. Da'amar, ben lefanav, ben la'acharav asur. We had a machloket already in the origin source of the Mishnah, whether it is forbidden before and after, or just before, correct?
Yes.
We're going according to Rabbi Yossi here, that it's forbidden before and after. Because if it was forbidden only before, then we would not have needed to tell you until the end of the Moed. Because if the only reason why we need to include Moed is Lifanav, because it itself is Asur, because it's a Moed, we put it in Megillat Ta'anit so that you'd be forbidden before it, but the day before the Moed is also the Moed. So you don't need that reasoning of the Megillat Ta'anit. So the only answer would be for Le'acharav. Therefore, this Beraita must be going according to Rabbi Yossi that holds Ben Lefanav Ben Le'acharav Asur. Iachi, says the Gemara, if that's true, Be'esrim v'tish'a nami. If this is true, on the 29th of Adar, one second. On the 29th of Adar, also, my irya dahavi yoma dimikame yoma dimitokim timida. So the 29th day of Nisan, right? What day is that?
29th day of Nisan.
That's the day before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. 29th day of Adar is the day preceding Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So if that's true, that the 29th day of Adar, why do we need my area to have yoma mekame yoma demitokim timida? Why do we need to put it in as the day that comes before the day that we settled the tamid? Tepukle dahavile yoma. Let us say that it's the day dibatar esrim utmanya be, that it is the day after 28th of Adar. Now for us, the 28th of Adar is not a day. That's not something. However,
Chodesh is 2 days. Is it 29 and 1 or is it 1 and 2?
so over here it's 29 and 1. Okay? So the Gemara is saying,
Rosh Chodesh is 2 days. Is 30 and 1.
sorry?
Rosh Chodesh is 2 days. Is 30 and 1.
Correct. Over here, that's what I'm saying. Over here, it goes into Rosh Chodesh. All right? Because that would be the day before Rosh Chodesh. Otherwise, it would not be. Now, what the Gemara over here says is, I don't need to include, you just told me that the reason why I put Rosh Chodesh in there is to make the day before Asur to fast on. But I don't need that, says the Gemara. If it's going according to Rabbi Yossi, right, then who holds that all these days, the day before is Asur and the day after is Asur. The 28th of Adar, not for us, but in Megillat Ta'anit, that's a minor day, a minor festival, which is Asur to fast on. And if the day before and the day after is always Asur, according to Rabbi Yossi, then the 29th day, which is the day after the 28th, is also the day before Rosh Chodesh, right? So I don't need to put Rosh Chodesh for the day before, because it's already exempt, because it's the day after the 28th, which is a minor fast day, as the Gemara will carry on to explain. Because the Gemara, the Braita says in Megillat Ta'anit, Be'esrim utmanya beit, on the 28th day, Aha atat besorta tavta liyudai. The good news came to the Jewish people. The lo yi'idun min oraita, that they would not be forced to cease from teaching and learning and practicing the Torah. Therefore, that day was considered to be a special day. So once we said that, Gemara now explains, what does that mean? So therefore, we've established that the 28th is a day of a minor festival. One time there was a gzera ruled against the Jews, that they will not deal in Torah, and they would not circumcise their children, and they would be forced to break Shabbat. Yehuda ben Shammua was one of the Tanaim. What did he do? Him and his friends, they went to one of the noble women and they asked her, all of the great Romans, they used to come and they used to speak to her. Okay? Amra lahem, she said to them, Imdu v'hafginu balayla. Stand up and make this hafgana, this public protest at night. Halchu v'hafginu balayla. They went and they did it at night. Amru, they said, I shamayim. Oh heavens. Okay? Lo achim anachnu. Are we not the brothers? Are we not connected? Lo b'nei av echad anachnu. Are we not the children of one father? Lo b'nei em achat anachnu. Are we not the children of one mother? Ma nishtanenu mikol umah velashon. In what way are we different from any nation and from any language? She'atem gozrim alenu gezerot ra'ot. They said to the Romans at the time, our father is your father. Who is the father of the Jews? Yaakov, right? Who is his father? Yitzhak. The father of the Roman is Edom. Who do they come from? Esav. Who is Esav's father? Yitzchak. So our father is Yitzchak, your father is Yitzchak. Our mother's Rivka, your mother's Rivka. We come from the same person. We're brothers. Why, if you have, through conquest, controlled so many nations and so many languages, why are you singling us out to be a people that you're persecuting and pulling away from our traditions? Ubetelum, and it made an impact, their words, and they were mevatel the gezerah. Ve'oto hayom asa'u yom tov. They made that day a day of a holiday, which was then absolved from fasting on that day. And that day is the 28th day of Adar. So if that's the case, as we explained, we don't need Rosh Chodesh to be in Megillat Taanit. The answer why it needed to be in Taanit is not for itself, because that's already from the Torah, but to make it Asur Lifnehem. How come it would not be Asur D'Oraita? Because Divrei Torah do not need to be buttressed, right? But we still need it for the day before it. But we don't need it for the day before it, because the day after 28th is the 29th, which is the day before Rosh Chodesh. Answers the Gemara, Amar Abaye, Lo nitzrecha, hey you are Rafi, Ela lechodesh meubar, only for a month, which is meubar, when it's 30 days. So there's a day between the day of Rosh Chodesh and the day of the 29th. But in a scenario where the Gemara was holding before, where the month of 29 backed up right against Rosh Chodesh day, then there would not be an extra day. So the Gemara answered, in an extra month, I put Rosh Chodesh in Megillat Taanit for the 30th day of Adar, okay? So there's an extra day there. And in that case, it would not have been absolved from fasting because it was the day after the 28th of Adar, because it wasn't. It was 2 days after the 28th of Adar. The Gemara now gives another approach to this answer. Rav Ashi Amar. Rav Ashi says, Afilu tema, even if you want to say lechodesh chaser, even in a month where there's no 30 days in Adar, but rather there's 29 days, right? So why would I need to put Rosh Chodesh in there? Kol she'le'acharav b'ta'anit, anytime something which is the day after is b'ta'anit, asur behesped mutar. Anytime when we said that the day afterwards is also asur and ta'anit, they made the hesped, the eulogizing, mutar. Now, why did they do that? Because we only extended the idea to aharav for fasting, which is the more extreme. But eulogizing, which as we know is a lesser infringement and infraction on a holiday, so that we allowed aharav. So therefore, you understand, so if it's the day after the 28th, it's asur in fasting, but not in eulogizing. But if it's the day before Rosh Chodesh, it would be asur in fasting and in eulogizing. So that's why it had to be in the Mishnah. Okay? V'zeh ho'ilu mutal ben shnei yamim tovim. Since it's between these two, asa'uhu ki yom tov atzmo. They made it ki yom tov atzmo. Ve'afilu behesped nami asur. So since it's sandwiched between these two, okay, therefore we would make it asur. Now it's very interesting this pshat of Rav Ashi, okay, because what the Gemara seems to be saying is that we're not following something. I want to show you. Let's word to Rashi for 1 second. The kol shela acharav, you see it exactly halfway down the page in the words of Rashi. Everyone see? The kol shela acharav? Klomar, as if to say, Kol she'asur mishum ahar yom tov b'ta'anit hu da'asur. It's only asur in fasting. Ha behesped mutar. But in eulogizing, it's allowed. Ve'ahachi, and therefore, nakat miresh yarcha, it said the Rosh Chodesh, Dileheve hai chaftet, that this 29th day, dinakat mutal ben shnei yamim tovim. It would be between 2 days. Mishum di'im mitzar, mishum dilifnei yom tov, because if it was forbidden because of before yom tov, emor, I would say, lo itzar behesped. Dehai dinakat kol shel acharav, lav mishum dilifanav nami asur behesped. Ela aide de parich dilitzar yom chaftet, mishum batar kafchet u demehadele kol shel acharav. The way Rashi is learning this Gemara is that it doesn't mean that after is asur in fasting but mutar in hesped, but before is asur in both. Rather, before is also only asur in fasting and not in hesped. So the lefanav of Rosh Chodesh is not enough. The le'acharav of Chavchet is not enough. But since that day is being pressurized from after Chavchet and before Aleph of Rosh Chodesh, so it's got a double whammy. It's between these two holidays. So we said already, let's consider it to be a Yom Tov, and therefore it would carry the higher stringency of not even allowing this thing. Now, why did Rashi choose to understand it this way? Okay? Why did Rashi choose to understand it this way and not the other way? I think Rashi is making a diyuk in the Gemara. Rashi is saying, okay, that the Gemara could have said, but now, since it's the day before Rosh Chodesh, so before is asur in both. But the Gemara doesn't say it. The Gemara says, since it's between two, which indicates that lefanav also has the same rule as la'acharav. And why do we phrase it la'acharav? Only because we're rolling off of kaf chet. But actually they're both the same in terms of only having the stringency, lefanav and acharav, of only fasting but not giving eulogy. Gemara now continues. Amar mar. Mitmanya be ve'ad sof mo'ada, from the 8th day until the end of the moed, till the end of the holiday, itotev chagad shivua u'aya de'lo lemisped. We learned that Shavuot was instituted in a way where it would always be correct. Gemara says, Lama li lememar mitmanya be. Why did I need to say from the 8th day? Lema mitish'a be. It should say from the 9th day. Vitmanya gufe asur. And the 8th day anyway is asur. Tehavele yoma di'itokim batemida. Because that was the day that the Tamid was established itself. Let me explain. From day 1 until day 8, that was when the Chachamim were fighting the issue. So we kind of said, all these 8 days, we're going to make them into a holiday. But the 8th day itself, it didn't need that because it was the actual day of the institution of Taanit. Okay, so why did I need to say until the 8th day? It should really say from the 9th day. Answers the Gemara, Kivan de'ilu mikla le milta, because if something were to happen, something were to arise, ubatlina le shiv'ah, and the rabbis would now get rid of the first 7 days, the arguing back and forth, Tmanye gufe asur, the 8th day would still be asur to eulogize. Dehavele yom hakama di totiv be chagad shvuaya. Now let me explain. What's the Gemara asking? From day 1 until day 8 is the Tamid institution exemption, let's call it that, okay? From day 8 until the end of the holiday is the day of the Shavuot institution. Ask the Gemara, there's an overlap here. The Tamid fight went 1 to 8, including 8. The Shavuot fight went 8 until 21, right? The 7 days after Yud Daled. So we basically have here 8 days, the 8th day, regardless of whether it was included in the first included in the second, it would be included in the first. So the Gemara asks, when you told me about the second, you should have told me from the 9th day, because anyway, the 8th day was covered by the story of the Tamid. Answers the Gemara, because if I were to abolish that for whatever reason, right, then the 8th day would still be. So if the Chachamim said, we're no longer doing that, like, let me give you an example. Let's say the Tamid itself again came under contest. The Tzedukim came back and they were like, you know what? We don't buy it. We're rescinding our agreement. We're fighting on the Tamid again. The rabbis might say, look, we thought it was a victory. It's not in the bag. These days no longer represent the victory over the Tzedukim in instituting the Tamid. So therefore, we're going to yank day 1 through 8 from the calendar. Okay?
Still have the obligation.
But we'd still have the obligation because the 8th day was the first day of the Shavuot thing, which might have still stayed. So therefore, the Gemara gives it to you for both reasons in case one of them disappears. Hashta da'atit lehachi, now that you explain this idea to me, that whenever there's a double reason, we should explain and put that in Megillat Ta'anit, so that if one was abolished, we still have the other one. Okay? So now, Esrim v'tish'a nami, let's go back to what we just learned earlier. The 29th day, right? Esrim v'tish'a nami, the 29th day also, kivan de'ilu mikla milta, because the reason why we put the Ta'anit, we put the Ta'anit in 29th in Ta'anit, because the ilu mikla milta, because if something were to happen, ubatline le'esrim mitmanya, and you deleted the 28th day, so you'd still have a reason to institute and to express that the 29th day is there. Okay? And what would that be reason? Because it was the day before the day of Rosh Chodesh, which began the process of the Tamid. Okay? Let's continue. So in other words, we now have a reason without the reason that we said before of the 29th day, because we are saying that we needed to say it for this purpose, because if the other reason would disappear, we still have it. Now, let's go back to the Gemara and we'll end with this. The Gemara says, our Mishnah, right? Where are we? We're going to quote the Mishnah, but let's go back to the summation before we move on. Okay. Remember, we had a machloket in the Megillah, in the Mishnah, on the days that were said in Megillat Ta'anit. We had a machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Yossi, if you remember, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi were always one off from one another. Okay, let's go back to the Mishnah for 1 second so we could read the Mishnah, because the Gemara is now going to decide who the halakha is like. The Mishnah is way back when on Daf Tet Vav Amud Bet, I believe. Okay? So turn back to page Tet Vav Amud Bet. Okay? 15, if you want to follow it in the art scroll, 15b2, I think. Yeah. Okay? Smack in the middle of the page. You see it? Kol HaKatub, 4 lines into the wide lines.
15 what?
15b2. Kol HaKatub b'Megillat Ta'anit, the Mishnah says, any dates that are written in Megillat Ta'anit, Delo lemisped, that you're not allowed to do a hesped, lefanav asur, le'acharav mutar. The day before is asur, you're not allowed to fast, you're not allowed to fast, or one would think misped also, but we'll see. Le'acharav mutar, the day after is mutar. Rabbi Yossi says, lefanav u'le'acharav asur. Right? That before and after it is asur. Delo lehit'ana lefanav, not to fast, lefanav u'le'acharav mutar. Before and after is mutar. Rabbi Yossi Omer, lefanav asur, le'acharav mutar. So one more time. Which is stricter? Not fasting or not eulogizing? Not eulogizing. So when it comes to not eulogizing, right? What did the Tana come out, or what did Rabbi Meir say? Rabbi Meir said, Lifanav Asur, before Asur, after Mutar. Rabbi Yossi said, nope, before Asur, before and after Asur. When it comes to the lighter one, Rabbi Meir says, no, both before and after are Mutar. Rabbi Yossi says, no, before Asur and afterwards Mutar. Okay? So the stricter one, everyone agrees before is Asur. And Rabbi Meir says after is Mutar, and Rabbi Yossi says after still Asur. On the more lenient one, Rabbi Meir says there's no before and no after. And Rabbi Yossi says no, there's still before on the more lenient one. Says the Gemara, Itmar. It was taught. Rabbi Chia bar Asi Amarav. Rabbi Chia bar Asi said in the name of Rav, Halacha ki Rabbi Yossi. The halacha is according to Rabbi Yossi. Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, Halacha ki Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Shmuel argues on Rabbi Chia bar Asi, and he holds exactly like we just said, that we're going to go according to Rabbi Meir, who holds the lighter version, the simpler understanding, the simpler halakha of the Mishnah. Now the Gemara says, Umi amar Shmuel achi. Did Shmuel actually say that the halakha follows Rabbi Meir, that before is asur on the stricter lo lemisped, not giving a eulogy, and before and after are mutar when it comes to only days that are written lo Taanot? Did Shmuel actually say this? V'atanya, we learned in a Braita, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel taught. U'ma Talmud lomar behon shte pa'amin. It says twice in the pasuk. It says the words behon. Lomar lecha. What does that mean? What is he referring to? If you take a look, right, the Megillat Taanit says elu yamin. These are the days that you don't fast behon on them. And umiktatam, and some of the days, the lo misped behon, that we don't give a eulogy behon on them. Why did it say behon twice? Lomar lecha, to teach you, shehen asurin, that they are prohibited, lifnehem ula aharehen mutarin. But after and before them is mutar. So in each instance, we said you can't fast on them, behon. You can't give a eulogy on them. It's almost coming to expressly state only on them you don't fast. Only on them you don't give a eulogy. But before and after, mutar. Ve'amar Shmuel, and Shmuel taught on that braita, halacha ki Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. He ruled like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, which means that he holds that you never go before and you never go after, which is really even a third interpretation that is even lighter than Rabbi Meir. Answers the Gemara, Mi'ikara Savar. In the beginning, Shmuel held Kivan de lekatana de mekal ki Rabbi Meir. Since there's no one more lenient than Rabbi Meir, Amar halacha ki Rabbi Meir. He went like Rabbi Meir. Right? Why? We'll come to that in a second. Kivan de Shmael Rabban Shimon Gamliel. Once he heard this braita that there was a Tana that was even more lenient, de mekel tvei, that he was even more lenient. Amar halacha ki Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. He went even more lenient, and he went according to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Why? At first glance, the reason is obvious. Since this is midrabanan, and we have a three-way machloket tanaim, Shmuel said, safek derabanan lekula. A safek on a rabbinic prohibition is to the lenient side. So therefore, I don't know who to rule like amongst these three tanaim. I have three opinions. I would follow the least lenient of the opinions, because all of this is midrabanan. We're not even talking about fasting on the day itself. We're talking about fasting or eulogizing on the day before the day. So therefore, Shmuel holds like Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. So both of them were correct that Shmuel had said halacha ki Rabbi Meir and halacha ki Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, except that one was later on the timeline when Shmuel actually saw the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and he ruled the Mekil. So effectively, Shmuel wasn't ruling like Rabbi Meir, and he also wasn't ruling like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. He was just ruling like the most lenient opinion on a safek derabanan lekula. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen.